The new MVP ladder is out on NBA.com. Sekou has moved James Harden into the pole position, displacing the Greek freak. Joel Embiid has entered the picture as well at number 5. Care to explain yourself?
Yes, I would like to give you an 18-game explanation for why James Harden is now
I think I know where you're going with
number 1 on this list. Look, I think it would be disingenuous for anybody to look at the work of the reigning, Kia MVP and not assume that he'd be anywhere but the number 1 spot. Harden's been fantastic. Under the circumstance, Griff, for him to play the way he has with as many different guys out of that rotation and lineup, let's give him his due. Mm-hmm. The coolest part about it is, and I wrote about it this week on NBA.com, is that twice James Harden has come up short in the MVP race because his narrative wasn't as good. He had numbers, but he came up second to Steph in 2015 and then second to Russell Westbrook, when both those guys had much more compelling narratives as to why they should win that award. Well, what better story could you have if you're James Harden than it's me by myself? All these guys are hurt. Capella's out. CP's gone. We were left for dead early in the year. We were 14th place. And now I'm on this unbelievable streak, and I'm leading us to all these different places. It'll be interesting to see if he can sustain it. But what a great turnaround for James Harden and the Rockets that's gotten him back into the mix in the MVP race.
42 points, 9 assists a game over those last 18 games.
Is that a lot? That seems like a lot.
That's a lot. That is a lot. I was one of the folks who voted for him in 2015. I was in the minority that season. I voted for him twice now, and the way that's going right now, I can't argue, because given the situation in Houston and the way they've were kind of left for dead by a lot of folks early on in the season, and the fact that they've gotten better in the absence of Chris Paul, that sort of screams MVP right now.
Well, it's fascinating. Their roster is the antithesis of the situation the Warriors find themselves in, right?
Right.
We started the show with too many mouths to feed in Golden State, and it's going to take some time. In Houston's situation, when Chris Paul comes back, that's going to make an impact on James's ability to be James. Right now, he gets to hold the ball for 18 seconds on the shot clock if need be and shoot every shot with impunity, and everyone on the floor with him knows that's okay. Sometimes it's easier to play that way free and easy. Now, having said that, what he's doing statistically, he's being this prolific, winning games against all of the best teams in the league. It's miraculous. It really is what he's doing right now. Nobody's ever done this.
The numbers are just mind-blowing. Every time we cite a statistic, it goes back to like Wilt Chamberlain, typically. I mean, Wilt Chamberlain's numbers skew everybody else's in NBA history. Every record that we try to split and come up with, we always come back, oh, yeah, Wilt did that 1,000 more times than this guy. But you go back that far, that's amazing.
But what Wilt didn't do was dribble and shoot step-back threes.
No,
So he has become the most amazing, difficult shot maker, and he makes it look really easy.
Right.
So the sustainable thing you talked about, he is taking shots that for him don't require a great deal of effort quite often. So it is fascinating to see that he's been able to keep this going. I'm not sure he couldn't keep this going. It's just that when there's more mouths to feed there, it changes the dynamic a little bit.
Well, in the context of the MVP race, to me, is, I think, something that people always forget about is it's not just you and how you're playing. It's the other guys. Giannis has an unbelievable season going right now, in a season where his team has gone to another level. So you're going to have to contend with Giannis when the final votes are taken. Steph Curry, the 2-time Kia MVP, is playing like he wants to be a 3-time Kia MVP, doing historic things of his own. You add in Joel Embiid in the season he's having. Oh, Kawhi Leonard in Toronto, that's right, they're number 1. There's all these other guys, and I don't even want to bring up the other guy that's sitting out right now in L.A., who the minute LeBron comes back, he immediately, burrows his way right back up into
Probably
the
start
mix.
making his case by returning and playing better basketball.
And a lot of people tell you that LeBron's absence and the struggles the Lakers have had enhances his MVP case, or should only serve to magnify the importance of having him in that lineup. So the entire landscape has all these different stories you could tell. And that's why I say it year after year. Your narrative oftentimes is what separates you at the end of the day. Everybody's going to have MVP numbers, but does everybody have a story that sounds as compelling to these voters? And I'm one of them. We all have had our hand in the vote at some point or another, Matt. What are we swayed by? The raw numbers, your impact, or a combination of those things, which usually means the narrative that's been weaved from the start of a season to the end. We knew Russ was going to win that MVP award. We talked about it in the summer. The day Kevin Durant decided he was leaving Oklahoma City, we were like, if Russ goes out and has a monster season, he's going to be on everybody's mind for MVP. Well, he went out and averaged a triple-double.
Right.
Pretty easy to figure that one out. Now, to me, this was kind of anybody's season with LeBron going west. Giannis stepped into that void and, to me, really took off, in terms of his viability as a legitimate candidate. But James Harden is kind of flipping that now. He's kind of making that more difficult to do because Giannis can't do it in a vacuum. He's doing it in a league where there are other guys who are having outstanding seasons as well.
Well, you guys being voters, and I am not, I'll ask you guys both a question then. What has to happen in Denver for Jokic to really get consideration? They're tied for the best record in the Western Conference.
He's on the list. He didn't make the top 5.
Right.
He's on the list.
In terms of the narrative, exactly how much more does he need to do before he's really in this conversation?
It's not what he needs to do to me.
Right.
But and this is a weird thing about the MVP voting, Matt. I don't know if you noticed this. You almost get penalized when you play on a team where there are other guys that play really well. Like, there are people that would argue that Jamal Murray is Denver's catalyst and best player, even though we know Jokic is the guy that they run things through and is really the center of their team, literally and figuratively, in terms of how they operate.
Right.
So he's suffering from some of that, and I also think he's suffering from the fact that there are a lot of people who are still figuring out just how good he really is.
And how good they are.
I try to make myself less susceptible to the narrative by giving myself a pretty simple definition for the MVP, and that's the player most responsible for his team's very successful season. So in that context, Nikola Jokic is definitely in the conversation. It doesn't even matter necessarily if he's their absolute best player, but if he's the catalyst, if he's the linchpin to what they're doing and making it work, then to me he's absolutely in that conversation, and he should be at this point with their record.
Well, using that definition, if Houston's injury issues are going to continue, this should just be called the James Harden Award.
Absolutely.
Because what he's doing solo right now is unbelievable.
Unreal. Right, and if there were a vote today, that's where that's probably going, because in the context of all the injuries, this is a very successful season they're having right now, and without James Harden,
no question,
it wouldn't be a.
But this is exactly why he's in the number 1 spot this week, and it's a fluid list, obviously. But it's also the reason why, if you saw my email over the weekend about the MVP ladder, you'd be mortified, because some people, they're so.
How do I get on this email, Chip?
They're so down the rabbit hole for their particular guy. Anytime you start an email that says, well, listen, I know I'm just a fan of this guy, but. Well, the but is everything after the but is hard to digest.
Yeah.
But
you got to call me out on TV like this.
Sorry about that. The guy who's getting the most love from his ardent fan base right now is Russell Westbrook. People want to know, well, how can you not have Russell Westbrook in the top 5? He's averaging a triple-double again.
Right.
And I'm like, this is when you have to divorce yourself from the raw numbers and really study how a guy's playing.
Sure.
Russ is struggling. Like he is averaging a triple-double, but he's the worst high-volume shooter in the league right now.
Right.
And you look at his shooting numbers, which anybody that would weight this process, an MVP candidate, you can't ignore that. You can't ignore that. And the fact that he's got another guy on his team in Paul George, who's every bit the MVP of the Oklahoma City Thunder this year.
Yeah.
I
might even argue their defense is the MVP of the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yes, and Paul George is on the list.
Than anything they do.
Paul George is in the top 10. Russ is not.
Right.
Which is, upsets quite a few of Russ's fans around the globe.
This segues very well to something else Sekou does, because he is now a one-man media conglomerate. And on his Hang Time podcast this week, he discussed Russell Westbrook and the Oklahoma City Thunder with Eric Horn from the Oklahoman.
The schedule coming up is very interesting. I know you can't get into season-defining stretches and all that kind of drama in an 82-game schedule, but this would seem like a very curious stretch of the season, if only they're going to find out just where they stack up against some other teams that fall in that mix, in terms of groups that are trying to sort out, their position in the Western Conference in particular. And Russ hasn't been great. He hasn't shot it great right now. Is this an opportunity for Russ to kind of reassert himself? I know he's averaging a triple-double, and he's almost made that commonplace now, but I feel like he needs kind of a nuclear stretch of, Russ shooting it well and playing at a really high level, just to kind of solidify what I think we're seeing from this team.
Yeah, this is going to be a big week. And I'm honestly, I was telling somebody this on the radio a couple days ago. I'm just as interested in that game against the Knicks as I am the other ones, because you cannot afford to go to New York and lose. That's a team that's not even trying to win. They're developed. No, and look, and Fizz has come out and just said they're trying to develop guys. They're working towards the future. That's not a knock on the Knicks. They just know who they are right now, and they're not trying to win games. So the Thunder's got to go up there and beat those guys, and they have a propensity to go out to the LAs, the Atlantas, the New Yorks, and kind of let their guard down. That game, that crazy game they won against Brooklyn, they played poorly for 3 quarters, and then Paul George just got crazy in the 4th quarter. They went up to LA and stayed out there for 3 days earlier this season, and the Clippers beat them by 16. So they've got to show that they can be consistent against the worst teams, the bottom dwellers, to me, because with the strength of their schedule in this back half of the season, they cannot afford to have slip-ups against Atlanta, against Washington at home without John Wall. They lost some really eye-opening games in the past couple of weeks that it kind of goes against their strong start against bad teams. They started 13-0 against sub-500 teams, and that was a problem for them last year. They played so poorly against bad teams. You thought they had it corrected in this first half of the season, and now they don't. And yeah, like you said about Russ, I think Jeff Van Gundy said this on a broadcast a few weeks ago, and it's stuck with me ever since. It was before the midway point of the season or so. He said it's getting late early in terms of training. And that makes so much sense to me when it comes to Russell. It's we keep saying, okay, he's going to come around. He's a guy who gets better as the season goes on. Statistically throughout his career, he's shown that. But it's getting late early for him in terms of, his free throw percentages, his shooting percentages throughout the season, taking the right 3-pointers, which I think he's done. He's taken the right 3-pointers more so this season. But frankly, instead of taking some of them, just moving the ball. And he's done it. So he's done it better than he has in other seasons, but he still needs to continue to stay on that track. He's had a cluster of games in the past few weeks where he shot, closer to where he's been in that, 48, 50% range. And I think he's put together a better cluster of those than he did in early December. But yeah, you got to get more consistency with Russell Westbrook, because he's going to be a guy with Paul George that's going to be taking a majority of your shots. He's going to be taking 20 shots a game. And if he's going to take that many shots, he's got to make 9, 10 of them, or he's got to get to the line at a high clip and make his free throws. And we just haven't seen a consistent stretch from that from Russell Westbrook yet.
Final meeting of the 4-game series for the Spurs and the Timberwolves tonight. This is Gorgie Jang showing off the touch outside.
Andrew Wiggins, draw and kick.
Yeah.